All right, hello guys. Welcome back to the Hipfire Podcast. Today we are joined by the co-hosts of the CAEsports podcast. They cover both the Ultra and Toronto Defiant. And so to start off, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about why you had the motivation to start the channel.
Yeah, I mean, my name is Spencer. I'm, one of the co-hosts, and obviously my other co-host is Chris.
Hey
Uh,
there.
so I guess just to quickly answer sort of why we started doing it was, it was Toronto had just announced that they were doing an Overwatch League team, and Chris and I went to the launch event there at the Real Sports Bar in Toronto, and it was an absolute blast. Obviously, I've been a fan of Overwatch for a while now, and it was sort of just we like obviously there was podcasts out there that sort of covered Overwatch as a whole. It's the same with the Call of Duty, right? They cover Call of Duty as a whole, like that sort of thing already existed. But I found like a little bit of a niche in the market was sort of these like team specific podcasts. Like I think the goal was always to be Fan the 590 for Toronto. If you guys are familiar with that. So that was really it. It was sort of just like building the Toronto community and having a podcast that like focused on Toronto. So if you were a Toronto Defiant fan, that would be the first place you'd go to.
Let's also be clear here too that this is a fun thing to do. It gave me a great excuse to buy some expensive podcasting equipment and pretend like I'm a professional.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely like a lot of skills I'm learning that are definitely useful for other things as well.
100%.
As we do these things, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
marketing,
And so,
like
yep.
all these sort of things, right? Like it's cool to like try to develop a video idea or a podcast idea or have somebody on and then see that succeed in some way or some shape or whatever. Like it's a really interesting experience. So overall, it's been a fantastic thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and, yep.
I'm
You
sure
know,
you guys know, but I remember we started out we started out with like just crappy equipment. We were just talking through like my AirPods microphone, and it was just choppy.
Yeah.
Just to see, I'm sure you guys are somewhere on the journey too. But
yep.
when we started out, you just start with kind of like the product isn't that good, isn't that polished.
Yeah.
We managed to get a great help in graphics designer Bocce Riley. Once again, shout out to him. He's
Yeah, he's
great. Uh, and yeah, that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, we sort of went through that, or I guess we're still going through that process right now.
Yeah.
Where our first video, I remember watching back, like we didn't realize there was no delay, so like we were talking over each other, we were talking through like half our clips.
Yep.
Yeah, it was our thumbnails looked like really suspect. So
Hey.
Hey,
no, you got yeah. I mean, hey, I made the logo, and that was pretty piss poor, but
We
okay.
we used to
Hey,
upload
get
on
this, the
SoundCloud.
logo.
The SoundCloud was rough too, right? Like I was like, man, like Spotify for sure is the way to go. YouTube, but like we did like free trial of SoundCloud, and then it ran out, and we were like, oh shit! So we like didn't record for like a month. Like it was rough, man. It was rough.
Yeah, I remember making the logo. I took the Canadian flag, put it on Microsoft PowerPoint, took a screenshot of the Overwatch logo, dragged it over top of the Canadian flag, then took a screenshot of all of that.
That's it.
That is
That's
waste.
Nice.
If that is so waste.
yeah, so
So usually with guests, we ask them for their favorite team and the favorite player. But I think for team wise, we pretty much know.
Yep.
But who are you guys' favorite players from this past year's Toronto Ultra team?
Man, I mean, I think I gotta go with. I mean, personally, Kleenex for me, just because of what he was able to do in the time span he was able to do it in. Right, like it's you can. There was a very clear before Kleenex came into the lineup and after Kleenex came into the lineup. I think feel for this team, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, very rarely do you see such an immediate turnaround. I mean, I know we saw it a couple of times throughout the year with like Matt going in NYXL or oh god NYSL. Sorry, that's the Overwatch in me.
Yep.
So he made a big difference, awakening into Florida and draws in Hollow sort of to OGLA. But I just what he was able to do with that team, I think was incredible. And obviously a big shout out to Chef Tony. I think his content's been amazing all year, and he's been one of the, if not the only starter from the preseason to champs. I think he's the only one who lasted on the starting five. So I mean that in
yeah,
itself is impressive.
Yeah, I just want to also give a shout out to Methods. I think that's my favorite too. I think he has a good package. He has, great gameplay. He has good personality. Been in the game for a long time. He knows the ins and outs of it. So It's really good. What about you guys? Who are you guys is, I guess, favorite teams, favorite players?
Yeah, so for me, obviously it's got to be the Toronto Ultra. Being from
Love to see it.
Toronto,
Let's go.
it was really nice to see that they were jumping into Call of Duty Esports. I will admit, at first when the speculated 10-man roster was brought about, I was a bit wary. I wasn't sure what to expect because it didn't like seem that they had necessarily a set plan for a set 5 players that they were going to throughout the year.
Yeah.
But I think what you pointed to, which really point, was the minute they brought in Kleenex, it looked like the entire dynamic around the team changed.
Yeah.
I think in terms of my favorite player, it'd have to be either Kleenex or Cammy. I think Kleenex, especially because he runs such a difficult role, being that first main entry sub
Yeah.
in itself, and for him to come into a team and immediately turn them around, especially in respawn, which they struggled in throughout the season.
100%.
It was really nice to see. Again, Cammy as well, because I'd seen his progress through EU, especially Black Ops 4, where he sort of got a name for himself.
Mhm.
And then I wasn't aware that he was such a great sniper. We saw a
Yeah.
couple of times him
Yeah.
like essentially just open up rounds with getting picks, especially on Piccadilly. So those two, I'm so glad that they're locked up right now officially. So they're my favorite two for sure.
Yeah, I think Cammy definitely deserves a shout out. Again, I've preached this multiple times on our podcast. I think you could seriously argue that he was probably the most improved player, I think, in the CDL throughout
Oh yeah.
like just the entire thing, right? Not just from the Toronto Ultra perspective,
Mhm.
but um there were definitely moments early on where I think he did struggle at points. And Chris and I talked about, like, it is a 10-man roster. Do you want to see Cammy potentially go to the bench and somebody like Brack or somebody come in? But at the end of the day, he stuck it out, and yeah, I think he really came up. And I mean, we got him for next year at least. So the 1+1, we were able to sign them for that. Hopefully, next year works out well, and we can see them on the team moving forward.
Yeah, this sort of leads
Yeah,
into our next question. Sorry to cut you off, Seth.
I was just gonna say a quick note on both Cammy and Kleenex. So Cammy, we were doing a little segment for him on our previous podcast, and I dug up this Black Ops 3 montage that someone made for Cammy.
Oh,
He looked like insane in Black Ops 3 when he was still underage.
Oh, I believe it, man.
Um, yeah, so it's just cool that he was able to see it through, because I feel like some of those young prodigies, especially if they're not in North America, it's hard for them to make it over. But he's able to do it, and I'm happy for it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
And then
we
Kleenex, you can go.
sorry, I was saying we were just talking, before the show that, like, if people, dude, Kleenex got top 5 at champs last year,
Yep.
playing with a team of Joe, Radit, Nolson, Weeman. That's no disrespect to those 4, but it's not like they're sitting in here in the CDL in 2020 lighting the league on fire. So you look at a performance like that, and
Yeah.
Kleenex sort of leading the way. I mean, I didn't, maybe he wasn't the lead man on that team, but it's just a cool sort of tidbit that, like, that's his back-to-back top 5, 6 champs performances for Cammy. So, like, no sleeping on him in 2021. You know what I mean?
No, definitely not. Yeah, and also so for Kleenex, Yasser and I actually ran into him in a match in
Oh
the
yeah, I forgot about that.
CDL playlist. He dropped 70 kills on us in a hardpoint.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
you guys are probably just getting slapped there. How did that feel?
Oh, it
Just
felt
running around.
bittersweet. At the same time, like it looks like Kleenex is on his game, so I'm happy about that. But at the same time, I'm just getting absolutely shit on.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop playing now. But at least
Kleenex
he was
is one of
doing
those. Yeah, Kleenex is one of those guys, man. Once he gets in the mode, once he gets his rhythm going, like, there's no stopping him, right? Even when you saw the Cold War debut and he was running around and people were kind of hyping up his debut, and he started like 10 and 18, he was rattled, right? He's like, "Ah, this map sucks. Sniper's heaven. I hate this map." And then he went from 10 and 18, and he just, like, started getting a couple kills together, and he dropped a 20 streak, and finished the game like
Oh yeah,
60 and 30. Like, he's just one of those players, man. When he's in the zone, there's no stopping him.
yeah, for sure.
But I guess that sort of leads into another question. Uh, with regards to Zinni, we've talked about how in many ways he's the face of this franchise.
Yeah.
He's the most notable name. What kind of outside of the game content would you like to see from him personally?
Oh man, I mean, that's a tough
Oh,
question.
that's a good
Anything really, right? Like, yeah, obviously Ultra's got a really good team in terms of their ability to create content. I think they've been one of the best all year.
Yep.
Mhm.
I would like to see them step it up though, because like even his drama alert stuff's hilarious. The Chef Tony stuff's hilarious. I think you could do even just more like a weekly segment of methods, either interviewing someone or
I'd
some
like to
post game
see-
analysis or something like that. Like, just making a joke out of it. Like, personally, there's a lot of things I think you can do, but Yeah, Chris, you can take it.
Here's what I think. So one thing that this is just gonna be just me saying something in general right now, but the one thing that these franchises have over like big franchises in the NHL is the fact that they can get a lot more granular and personal with their community. You know, there's usually no way in hell. For example, we interviewed the GM of like Toronto Defiant last year and a couple of players. Like, there's no way in hell I would have been able to interview Babcock
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
other people like that. So it's obvious that they can be more granular. So what I like to see is them to capitalize on that. So setting methods up with a sponsored Toronto Ultra stream where he just like he goes play some Warzone, answers his questions in chat, stuff like that. I think that's how you connect with your community, which is how we keep them engaged.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that a little bit. Even like you saw the Huntsman do with like Scump and them played Fall Guys, right? Like I think stuff like that with the Ultra would be really funny too. Like Fall Guys or Among Us, Warzone, like a couple of these different like fun games that like the team themselves could play. And you could obviously have a community game night where you play with some, selective fans. They kind of do that with Warzone Wednesdays, where they'll have like methods or bands come on, and, you as a fan can sign up. I think things like that would be a good thing moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I think they still have. I see that all the time from their Twitter account where they tweet out you can play with the players, which is really cool. I think, and
Yeah.
I'd like to see them moving forward because I know even amongst my friends who aren't necessarily die-hard Call of Duty competitive fans, but they follow Call of Duty as a game in Warzone, especially.
Yeah.
I know Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs recently became, I don't know if he's a part investor on the Toronto Ultra. I'd like to see them incorporate him as a way at least to build brand awareness, to get
Yeah.
like more people aware of the Toronto Ultra. Because I know like my friends, if they like knew about this, they'd definitely at least be more invested because they'd have someone to cheer for. So I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
See.
I mean, Mitch did play in the Warzone tournament that, the Ultra had that
True.
100K thing and he played alongside Methods, but I agree with that. Obviously, Mitch is a busy guy.
Yeah.
But I think that
Yeah.
that also kind of goes to Call of Duty. I think Call of Duty needs to do a little bit of a better job of marketing the esport as a whole within their game. I mean, I know they have team skins and stuff like that, but there should be like a tab. There should be, I think, like consistent events. Like
Mhm.
it should really be like within the game itself, because you're right. So many people play Call of Duty, and I don't think I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably lower than you'd think of people who watch the CDL regularly, but also two are just aware that it's a thing. Like you're right. Like there's probably friends who don't even know Toronto Ultra has a team or Toronto has a team.
Oh, for
And
sure.
that's stuff that I would like to see
I'm
Call of Duty
guessing it's
within the game itself improve.
I'm guessing it's in the single percentage points. Well, I guess that
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
Like-
Definitely, yeah.
maybe 1 or 2% watch, and maybe like you have double that.
More
No.
than 1 or 2% though. Like 330.
I don't. I think if you have like, how many millions of people are playing the game worldwide? You have so
That's the
many.
thing, is a
people
lot of casual players.
It's
Yeah.
it's also because
Maybe.
like Activision themselves have done such a poor job of like pushing the game. I guess the game developers with that, and you could see it especially with Modern Warfare. The game developers did not give a shit to put it lightly.
There was no ranked game mode.
They
That's the
they
biggest
didn't
thing,
care
right?
about competitive,
Oh my
which didn't make
God, they
sense
needed ranked.
considering you just went into a however
Damn.
like $300 million like league, and you're not going to promote that within your game besides some skins and
Yeah,
like they only just got a supporter credit card once the season is over.
yeah.
Yep.
So it hopefully
Yeah.
with new developer like Treyarch, they'll be more at least they'll show more passion towards the competitive scene, show more love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it boggles my mind that there was no ranked. I think
Well,
that's like
why?
That kills me.
Why is that a thing? Why is it not a thing?
I don't.
There's literally no reason other than they want it. From what most people speculate is that the Warzone was always their main focus, and multiplayer just took a backseat, and they created a competitive playlist just to appease the fans. That's about it. They did not care about focusing on creating this robust rank system. All they cared about was Warzone's where it's at. Warzone is where we're seeing all the fans and players play, and we're gonna try and keep them happy and screw everyone else.
I mean, don't get me wrong. That's obviously important to focus on Warzone. I think Warzone, like this year, was really successful, and I think everyone's like, man, I would have loved to have seen how this year would have went if Warzone wasn't as successful as it was. I think not enough people give,
That's a good
I
point.
think, how successful the end of the year was. And I think there's a higher correlation than a lot of people would like to realize with also how successful Warzone sort of been and being able to like use those team skins in matches and drawing attention in that way, and how many pro players can play Warzone and build a following off of that and then bring those fans over to their competitive side. Like, I'm not going to knock the putting a large focus on Warzone. I actually think it did more, beneficial things to the community than the negative. But like, yeah, like it's just even just a simple elo rating, right? Like, I'm not a developer,
Yes,
but it can't
yeah.
be like rocket science to develop a ranking system. Like, you don't need to have
I think you
updates like
can.
Fortnite every single week, but like, give us something.
Well, I think it is kind of hard to do a ranking system. So I feel like if they're going to do it, they probably want to do it right. But I also feel like they need to do a ranking system if they want to ensure the long term success of this. I feel like Warzone. I don't want to say it's a fad. I feel it's a little bit of a fad.
BRs usually
you know,
have 3 years.
Well, they did have Battle Royale for Black Ops 4. Obviously, very different circumstances. It wasn't free.
Yeah.
The system wasn't nearly as fun as Warzone is, so I'll give Warzone credit for that. But
Yeah.
if they one of the main reasons competitive Call of Duty was so popular was because of ranked play. Like League play in Black Ops 2 was what really
was huge.
ignited their entire scene initially, and that's why it's like many people claim the start of Call of Duty esports, at least where it got big, was Black Ops 2 when League play happened and everyone was watching it. So if they could replicate that in some manner, I think it'd really get a lot more people.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's a win-win in a couple different scenarios. Like, one, it really increases the path to pro, and I know we're going to get into a little bit the differences between CDL and Overwatch later on, but path to pro is such a huge thing. So when you have a ranking system, that's one of the best parts of Overwatch, in my opinion. That's just like the top 500, right? Like, it gives people a way to be noticed. Are you top 10 in the world on your role? Like, I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to be a pro. Obviously, those skills don't necessarily transfer over, but I guarantee you, it sort of helps with your ability to get like picked up by a potential tier 3 or tier 2 organization, right? Like, these things sort of matter. Like, if you're playing Call of Duty and you're going up against the Octanes and the Sillies and the Assaults of the world consistently, like, and you're performing well, like, at some point it increases the likelihood of you getting noticed and sort of scouted and picked up on these teams. And then also too, I think it just helps the players sort of stream and build their brands in that respect. I mean, I know, like, obviously you can stream Warzone, but it's not the same. Streaming scrims has its pros, but there's the obvious cons of you like giving away team strategies. But I think like streaming league play would be something that a lot of people would be interested in. Like, I would love to log on and see, methods playing alongside Arcides and you know what I mean? Like Abizi and Envoy on his team. And oh man, he's going up against I'm losing player, but like Cammy, Kleenex, Formal on the other, right? Like, just like these, it'd be really cool to just log in and be like, oh, like those are two really cool teams playing against each other. So I think that would help in that respect as well.
Yeah, they were kind of doing that for a couple of years with 8s and 10s lobbies where they'd get a bunch of pickup teams and play against each other for like $10, $50 matches.
Yeah.
But the problem was that this year it just got really stale because people didn't love the game.
Yeah.
So every 8s, or I guess it was 10s, yeah, every 10s lobby ended up being the same circle of players every day, and it just got kind of boring.
Yeah, it'd be cool to watch somebody grind. Like, oh man, like, what's Kleenex on the
Yeah.
leaderboard, right? Is he just top? Did he just hit top 20? You know what I mean? You kind of join your like own players and they're grind up this like leaderboard, obviously in their spare time outside of scrims and outside of Warzone and stuff like that. I think it'd be a cool way. And I think it would help other players get noticed. Like, oh, who's this guy number 1 in the world? Like, what the hell? Let me check out his Twitch.
What the hell, Spencer? What have you been doing?
What? Yeah, I think it'd be cool.
Oh, 100%. But so why don't you move on to our next question we have?
Yeah, so next question is a little bit more Ultra specific, and we were wondering what your reaction was to the rumors surrounding Classic and Looney, where they're a bit unhappy with having to only play out of Toronto and not being able to play in a different state, and that kind of conflicting with scrims and stuff. So what was your reaction to those rumors?
Man, that's a really tough situation, to be honest. So there's I'm pretty torn on that whole thing. Obviously, like, you want Looney to be able to go home, and you're right, it is online, so you can sort of in theory play from wherever. And I'm not sure what the sort of camaraderie was like when they were playing from their apartments. They still got together as a team and went out. So on one hand, I obviously see that side of things, but on the other hand, like if you're part of a team, you're part of a team. You know what I mean? If your contract was sort of be
Mhm.
to be in Toronto and you're getting paid, like I don't know their salaries, but I guarantee you Looney was making good money. Right? Like I guarantee you Looney, like we've
Yeah.
heard the rumored salaries. There's no way Looney wasn't making really good money from his contract. So if you're getting paid like 150, 200K, and I'm not saying this is I don't know, right? I'm just throwing out numbers here, but I don't think I'd be too far off in sort of my estimation to $200,000 a year to play Call of Duty. And, like the least you can do is like I don't know, like the stake with the team and try to scrim and give it your all while you're there, right? Like if you just want to go home and be with your family, like just go home and be with your family, but then like kind of give up your spot in a way. Like I don't know. I was kind of torn. I saw both sides. I saw the
Here's-
organization. I think it was handled poorly from the organization's perspective as well as the player's perspective, but I don't think it was this like black and white scenario where it's like, oh yeah, just let him go, let him do whatever he wants. It's like, well,
Mhm.
it's still a team.
Well, just from a like a slightly different angle, uh, one of the ways to be successful is to, and this goes for anything, right? This goes for a successful organization, in-person sports team, like, rugby, football, stuff like that. You need to create like an atmosphere, a certain atmosphere that people can really buy into. And the atmosphere is a lot harder to maintain out when you're playing from remote areas. It's just that simple. You know, if I'm if let's say, like, for example, when I was in school, I could not do work at home. I just couldn't do homework at home. It was that simple. I had to be at the library or else my mind wandered. It would just wasn't really on. I would always kind of flick to Netflix and watch that instead. So I think there's a really big, powerful meaning said when you really need to create like a certain environment that provokes you to be in the state where you can perform, where you can be able to be on for training. And I think that's what the Ultra management was trying to do. They were trying to create this environment even in uncertain times. And that's why they didn't want their players to play from home. It's because you just kind of let that thing loose. You let people do it once, and then it happens twice. And then next thing you know, another player is like, why can't I do this? And then they kind of break that pattern of life, and you can't really form that anymore. So that's kind of my take on it.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think Toronto, from my understanding, was one of the few teams that actually wanted their players to live in their home city base location or whatever have you. I
Yeah.
know most of the teams, for the most part, they let at least one of their players live away from home. I know Formal, for example. I mean, everyone from Chicago, they either lived in Dallas or Formal lived alone. Dallas,
Yeah.
they had all their players in Dallas except for Illy, who lived in Canada, and I think in Mississauga. So Toronto's one of the few teams that had all their players there, and I'm assuming that was part of their contract, was that they needed to be a part of be there the entire time. Obviously, I do
Yeah.
agree. I think from both the players' side tweeting out about it and then the organization side, it could have been handled a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think that can, in some ways, hurt Toronto's image. But again, it's a learning experience for them.
Oh, I think it definitely hurt their image.
Oh, it definitely. I think, at least for me.
I just think the issue was like the way that they handled the sub. Like so when they brought Kleenex in to replace Classic, but then that and for scrims, and they looked great in scrims. My problem was that when Classic came back, they still played him that weekend and didn't play Kleenex, and they kind of just like wasted a week of scrims with a different player.
No,
Like
it
I
was the
get
other way.
like
They I think they did play. No, you're right. Yeah, they play. Yeah, I think Classic got
Yeah,
upset,
no,
right? Because he didn't
yeah
perform, and then he got benched.
it was.
yep
I
Yeah,
think it
yeah,
was the second Minnesota weekend. They scrimmed with
yeah
Kleenex, and then it was a important weekend for them because at that point they had an opportunity to get 2 wins. They get 2 wins. They go to semifinals. That was massive because they were in a really tight race at that point, and really throughout the end of it. But because they put Classic back in, they ended up losing their first match, I believe, to Florida. Which, in their defense, I believe Florida went on to win that event. And then
yeah.
they ended
yeah
up
they were on fire.
losing. They ended up having to play Chicago, and they got 3-0'd, which you can't really expect much. So, I mean, it was a tough scenario to be in. But again, with Seth, I'm on Seth with this. For them to make the decision, whoever it was, to put Classic back in when it sounded like he just arrived in Toronto that same,
It did, yeah.
it didn't really make any sense to me. You started putting the team at a disadvantage when all we were hearing about from the players, like I remember TJ Halley tweeted about before that event. He said, "Wow, like Toronto's winning this event because of how good they were in scrims." So to me, it didn't make any sense. But
Well, I think it also was the issue is though it's one thing to say that, but like let's not forget that I believe Classic went home for some sort of family emergency, right? That was sort of the
He
news
did.
that came
Yep.
up, and then so they played him that weekend. He underperformed, and then they sat him for Kleenex the next weekend, and then everybody lost their mind. They're like, "Whoa, Classic goes home for to see his family emergency.
Yeah.
You're gonna bench him? Wow, what a shit organization!" It's like, well, wait a minute. Like we came on the podcast. It's like no one knows how Kleenex performed in scrim. Like obviously it sucks, but if Classic went home and you throw somebody else in there, and all of a sudden your team starts winning, like what are you gonna do? And I almost think that that's what they try to do. They try to have it both ways. Like, okay, we'll play Classic this weekend, and then we'll make the change a week after. And then people just had the same reaction. Like, I almost think it would have been worse if he had came back and then Kleenex all of a sudden was in the lineup, and you've been like, really? Like, this guy goes home for his family emergency, he comes back and he's lost his job? Like, what are you doing? I feel like it was just a tough situation to be in. And honestly, I'm just happy they figured it out by the end by keeping Classic in and also Kleenex, because I think that was arguably our best 5. I mean, I still wonder how it would have looked. I still would have loved to have seen Bracken there, especially when it went 2 ARs.
Oh, same. He's really good in search, man. He's a
Yeah,
search like wizard.
Especially when it went 2 ARs. I still wonder if we had somehow been able to run like a Brack Methods, Cammy Kleenex, and then Banter Classic at that point, kind of take your pick. And I think whatever fits the roster better. I think Banter a little bit better in-game leadership. I think Classic had some higher highs. But I still think that might have been interesting, but I think by the end of it, I was still happy to see Classic and Banson with Kleenex.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just to go back to the original point. Sorry, just to go back to it. Yeah, obviously, like it's one thing for I also felt bad for the organization because you have like Looney and people here just sitting here.
It was a tough place.
Tweeting it out, but I'm also like, oh man, like like you're also collecting your check. Like, kind of put the phone away for a second, right? Like, if you want to go home with your family, you could have went home with your family, but you didn't want to lose the money coming in, right? So like, let's, you know what I mean? Like, that's, I don't know. It was really tough because there's a pandemic. I feel like there was no right answer, and I feel like everyone just thought it was black and white, and I don't think it was.
No, I definitely think you have a valid point there, and it is interesting. I almost expected. I know it's kind of a very gray situation. I expected the organization to come out with something about it, but I think they handled it all behind the scenes, and at least from now, it looks like that's been in the past. Looney's obviously off the organization now. Rumored to Seattle, so we'll see how that goes. But moving on to our next question, we've seen well, I haven't seen many teams do this. I know Paris is rumored to start doing this, but would you like to see the Toronto Ultra, potentially even this free agency for all we know, go after Canadian players on their team, sort of like how the Toronto Defiant have Canadian players?
I mean, like, obviously, but if it's the right one, right? Like, I don't want Toronto. I mean, because Paris is rumored to do an all French team, and obviously, like, hey, Paris, getting Hydra makes a world of sense. But I don't know if they can get 3 other French players to round him out to where that's a top 4 team, right? Like, I don't want Toronto to go out there and be like, our team next year is Royalty, Exotic, Jimbo, right? It's like, if you gave me like Jimbo, Royalty, Dashing Illy, or like, Jimbo, Dashy, Illy, Gunless, okay, sure. Right now we're talking. Like, I'm okay with that Canadian team. Because I also think that that's a really good team. I think that's a competitive team. But I don't want them to just go out there and start signing people with a Canadian flag beside their name, or like a Seam, right? Like a Seam, Gunless, Illy and Dashi's like, that's actually not a bad team. It's a pretty good. Yeah,
you can make a really good Canadian team.
Yeah, I was talking to someone else on Twitter, Ultra Update, I believe, or Ultra Hype, one of the two. I can get those things mixed up sometimes, but we were sort of joking around, being like, "Yo, what would it be like if there was a Call of Duty World Cup, like there is an Overwatch League? Like, what would Canada's roster be like? How well would they do?" And I think it'd be cool. So I think if the talent's there and you can make the team a good team, it's worth it. I'd still love one Canadian. Like, I would have loved to have seen Dashy come and sign with Toronto, or just Illy, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen, but God, I would have loved to have seen it. But honestly, I'm happy with them just putting their best foot forward and trying to get that win. But Chris, you can chime in there, see what you think.
Yeah, no, it would be nice to have one Canadian on the team. I don't think it's as urgent to have Canadians on the team as it is or was in Overwatch, because Overwatch, we had a full Korean roster. It's as somebody who doesn't speak the same language as their primary language, it's hard to connect with them. So I think that bringing Canadians on for the Overwatch Toronto Defiant was a lot better of a play, because they're a lot easier to market to us, and I felt I had better connections with the team after that happened. Doesn't go the same for Ultra. Everybody who the alternative to not Canadians is usually Americans, and it's pretty
Or
easy to connect with
European.
those individuals too, or Europeans. But once again, it's easier to connect when you have like a shared language.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, honestly, like at the end of the day,
That's a good
like with Defiant, like we did that to Canadian direction and we still got
Didn't
smoked.
work.
So I'd rather see like a Korean roster that wins
They're
personally.
making good money.
Yeah.
Apparently they're making some of the most money in the Overwatch League, even though they're
Yeah, I know.
god
like
awful.
Mangachu.
Yeah, like I don't know, like exactly. Like Mangachu is on the bench. Like it's great that he has a Canadian
Yeah.
flag beside his name, but he also didn't play, and we also
I get that.
lost horribly and really could have used. Like it's great that Scherfer was on there, but once again, push
He
come to
isn't
shove,
playing.
he didn't play. So it's like great. You know what I mean? I'd rather see Shockwave in there instead of Scherfer. I don't care that Shockwave's from Denmark. He would have played and he would have played well. But obviously, yeah, like I think creating content and creating like a relatable. But like, yeah, it's Call of Duty, man. Everybody's relatable. Like, let's be serious here. It's the best part about the CDL, man. Everybody's content's so easy in the CDL, man. It's so much different in Overwatch. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. So, yeah, I'd like to see them. If they're good players, they're good players.
No, I sort of agree with that. Obviously, it has to be the right fit. Like Asim, I love the guy, but we already have Kleenex, who, in my opinion, is better. So
Entry frag, you already have that.
don't need that. I mean, Illy obviously would be. I'd love to have him, but there's no chance he's dropping. Getting dropped.
Hastro's not getting rid of Ilya anytime soon.
No chance.
No.
I mean, you look at the others. I mean, Gunless is an interesting character. Obviously, I know from his perspective, he would never want to come to Toronto because
Yeah, I heard that.
his upbringing sounded like it was pretty rough. So
Yep.
there isn't exactly a spot to just get a Canadian, but like you said, I think in terms of relatability, there are lots of players in the Call of Duty.
So yeah, I think Asim actually would work. I know you're saying right now Kleenex is our entry fragger, but he also was our entry fragger because we didn't have anybody else to entry frag. Like I think you could run Asim as the entry and then just have Kleenex support him. Or who knows how it's going to be in 4v4 with blockers, right? I know like Kleenex can play slow.
It's gonna be a bit different.
Yeah, Kleenex doesn't always have to be this entry guy, right? Like I think he's shown that his work ethic's insane. We've heard that. Obviously, he's improved a lot over the year. Like from a few different people that maybe he wouldn't have started at the beginning of the year because he just simply wasn't gonna. But he grinded and he got to the point where he is today, where he's like, in my opinion, again, one of our, if not our best player on the team. So I think if you put Kleenex in a support sub role, he could still shine and just have his team right in there and have Kleenex support. But also that's like meta dependent, that's game dependent. I think Asim Kleenex could be a pretty good SMG duo.
That's actually something I didn't even consider. Would be moving an entry player like Kleenex to that support role. Granted, I mean it also depends on the game. Like we've seen from 4v4, and sometimes you don't really have a designated entry player.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can have sort of both SMGs go in first, depending on the situation. So it obviously would have been nice to have a scene, but again, I mean, from what it sounds like, the rumor. I guess we can move to this. What are your thoughts on the rumored roster, which is Cammy, Kleenex, methods, and bans? Do you think that they should have gone or after other players in free agency, or do you think sticking with this current four that they had last year makes sense for them?
Yeah, Chris, I'll give you this in a second because I'm like super passionate about this. I'm almost, in my opinion, there's no way that can be your starting four. There's just no way. No, you give your opinion after, but I am of the thing of like 0% chance. At the very least, that can't be your like goal. I mean, if you go up there and you pick up like a Hydra or a Pred, or you try to take a risk on a Canadian like Jimbo, right? If you go out there or you say, hey, we're gonna try to put Kleenex, as a support, we're gonna run a seam alongside him, and it doesn't work, and then you have Bance as like your bench player, and you bring him in to sort of be like that safe swap, like that's one thing, like fair enough, right? You took a risk and it didn't work, and now you're just running it back, and that's fine. But I think so many teams have improved, and I think you could argue Classic was better than Bance, right? And that's no disrespect to Bance. I thought Bance is a pretty good player. I know he brings a lot in terms of like leadership and stuff like that, but in my opinion, there's no way that you can sit there and on Cammy and Kleenex's last year with the organization in their contract, right? Like as soon as it was a 1+1, we brought their team option. That means at the end of next year, they can go wherever they want, right? Like, yeah, it'd be nice if we re-sign them. But if you're Cammy and Kleenex and you see every single organization around you improve, and then your organization just runs it back on the team that was 11th seed up until the final 2 months of the season, like I don't know, man. That's a tough look. Like, I really think this team needs to improve. There's so much talent out there. In my opinion, there's no excuse for them not to improve, or at the very least, take a shot. Right? Like Hydra's, Pred. These have been players
Yeah.
we've been talking about for a long time. Standy, Asim. You got guys like even like a I don't know, right? Like Major Maniac and Priest, like both of them went to Minnesota. Like, did Toronto even take a run at them? Like, probably not, but like they definitely should have. I don't know. Like, I think in my opinion, there's too many talent out there for you not to at least try to improve to where.
I think the guy you might be looking for is Afro. I think he'd be
Yep.
a perfect fit for
Yep.
this team.
Yeah, I've heard really
He's
good
like
things about Afro too.
He's so good. Yeah.
Afro's really good. Like I said, Standy's really good. Fire, even if you want, like again, like we've obviously the rumored is Insight, who's a mini R. Like, if you're gonna why would you use it?
I don't get that at all.
I get it from a like, I know typically in Call of Duty the main AR is supposed to be your leader, your shot caller, right? Methods doesn't excel in that role. I think that's why we kept Bance. He was the in-game leader. We heard from Methods himself throughout the year. Maybe you think Insight obviously has previous experience with Kleenex, is known to be an in-game leader, a really good S&D player, which is what we struggled with at the end of the year. If you want to sit there and go, you know what, maybe Insight can play the in-game leadership role. Maybe he can actually improve this team, long term, by like once we give him a couple months to practice, by the end of it, maybe he can push Methods out of his spot. If you want to use one of your sub spots, by all means. Worst case, it doesn't work, put him in challengers and it's Methods team. Like, then it's no difference, right? I don't mind that, as long as you get a 6th person on that roster to potentially push Bance, or to be frank, Cammy or Kleenex out of a spot. But like, you need that other person. If it's Afro, if it's Pred, I don't care. But if this team goes back with those 4 again, I think it's a pretty big question mark heading into the year, because I don't know where I put that top 4 against these other top 4s that are already being rumored. Unless Cammy and Kleenex just carry it. But then if you're Cammy and Kleenex, it's like, well, what the hell? Like, why do we have to do everything?
Yeah.
Methods can do it too. I'm just saying. You know what I mean? Chris, you can give your opinion. Sorry, that's my rant. I'm done.
No, it was great to hear. But Chris, what is your point on this entire situation?
I agree with Spencer. I don't have anything to add.
Really?
Hey, give some opinion. Come on. Like, what do you mean?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. What kind of guest is this? This guy comes on and just says, "Oh, I agree."
You had such a rant. I pretty much agree. Like, they shouldn't run it back. They should feel like Bance should. I hate to say it, but I feel like Bance is the one that should be benched. That's that simple. They should potentially pick up 2 people, have them play almost as a challengers person who like can come up. But I think
that's what I was kind of saying. Like, if you go after Insight, right, you could definitely do Insight instead of Methods, and then you could slide Chain right in there. It could be Insight, Chain, Kleenex, and Cammy, and that would be a disgusting forward.
Yeah. Now I know
The
Chain.
thing is,
You got like some stuff behind the scenes with Chain, right? If you think he's got it figured out, he's got it figured out. Because I heard he's disgusting, right? I mean, we saw him at the beginning of the year.
He's really good.
He's
at
really
SMD.
good.
Yeah.
So it's like, fuck, man, like, take a risk.
Yeah,
Take a risk. Get Pred, right? Like, he's finalist from APAC, but he's fast. The kid's good. He's got good stats. Like, if he doesn't work out, you got Bance there. But if he does, you've improved your team. So you're either running it back or you've improved. There's no. Whereas right now, it's like, oh, we're running it back, but other teams have improved, so we're kind of like, you've gotten worse.
That's 100% where I'm sort of at, because when I heard that they were sticking pat, it's like, I guess it's the comfortability and the chemistry that they want to build off. But like in their situation where they were like, they had some great events, and that's when Cammy was playing his lights out. In 5v5, keep in mind. In 4v4, I think it's gonna be a lot more strategic. And I think part of it's on Marky B, because I know for a fact that he and Bance have a very strong relationship. And that's one of the reasons why Bance is on this roster today. And Bance is a good player in his own right. I mean, he was the in-game leader, and you could hear it in their comms whenever they went to Astro Gaming Listen-In. It was Bance that was the big voice. He was the guy directing the team for the most part, which I think is something they needed. And even at the beginning of the year, when they brought in Bance, one of the reasons that they cited was that they needed better communication. But at the same time, you look at all of the players you can get in the free agent talent pool right now, and then in the AM scene as well, and the fact that you're not taking a shot at one of these guys, like you said, Hydra, Pred, or even you look at the EU scene, we're seeing players like Scraps and Wuskin and
Oh my
even
God, you're
zero.
right.
Boggles
They're
my
not
mind.
getting offers. Why don't you take a chance on them? Even if it is Waskin and you're trying to move methods out, or it's Scraps or Zero, who's been a very, very strong flex player in 4v4 at the past, and even this past year we saw him when he showed London as a flex player. He was very strong. I don't know why they don't take a chance on them or even pursue it. For all we know, maybe they have and they've been told no because of the fact that they have to live in Toronto. But there's got to be like, you can't tell me that there are players that don't want the opportunity to play with Cammy and Kleenex, like two really young guns, after we've seen numerous teams
100%. I
play
know
with
there
like
is.
young players like Illy and Shotzi and Mac and Awakening, and they all have success. Why is Cammy and Kleenex any different? So I really don't understand
It,
their hesitance to sort of pursue that.
it will boggle my. I have too much faith in the organization to not make that point. Like in my opinion, they've got to be just waiting it out until either some young person establishes themselves and they can pick it up. Like it will, and I mean we'll have Autumn on the show at one point when once the roster's announced, and I'll ask him what the thought process was, because it will boggle my mind if you can't sit there and think of a potential better roster, or at the very least one with a higher upside than the four you see in front of you, right? You want to keep Methods? Sure. I think Methods is a great player. I think Methods gets a little bit, knocked on from this community. I think he can. We saw it. We won a chip this year. He clutched up when he needed to. Even though we got eliminated by London the final game, Methods played well, right? Give the kid some credit. He showed up in the final game of the season where some other players, Bance included, didn't. Methods was there making plays in the hill, right? Like almost turned that last hard point. Like in my opinion, again, whatever. Like obviously in-game leadership is important. So either A, find a AR who can in-game leader, or B, like you said, take a shot on one of these young guys and hopefully you can develop that. Like Weskins, there's no way you can't tell me that a Major Maniac, Priesta, Cammy, Kleenex roster doesn't sound better than just running it back. Like I don't, like you said, there's so much good talent there. Like
the one situation where I
Scraps.
one situation where I see them keeping this four is if only if they think that these people will perform better in a 4-man meta than they did in the 5-man meta, and they also see them like growing as players and growing their skill level and cohesiveness as a team over the offseason.
But that's not even a good reason, because you can add somebody on the bench. Like I'm not saying fucking cut Bance and never talk to him again, right? I'm saying get somebody else on so you can have the best of both worlds. You can literally have a Chain or a Pred as your fifth and be like, hey, if you want to push Bance out of a job, push him out of a job. But if you don't, we're just gonna run it back. Like you have that option. You don't have to choose. You can have both.
I don't think. My thought is that like they're all very obviously going to pick up another person. The question is, maybe do they pick up another 2 people and drop Bance?
No, you can have 6. You don't need. I know the minimum is 5. You can easily
minimum
have
is 5. But you can have more.
Easily have 6. We had 10 this year.
Max is I think 7 or 8. Yeah,
I think Max is 8. Yeah, we had 10. So 6 is not out of the realm of possibility. So just get insight if you want to have someone to push methods. I think having a backup AR is always a good idea. I have no problem with that. And then just get somebody else. Asim, Scraps. You know what I mean? Standy.
Nasty
is really.
London's going for him.
Nasty is really good. Chain, like there's so many people. If we run it back with the rumored 5, I'm going to Mulled, and it's going to be. I will not be. I don't know. We'll see. That's it.
To counter your point, Chris, I mean, with that argument, I mean, you look at the other teams that are being formed in 4v4, and they look more dangerous than they do in 5v5. I mean, that phase roster that's been announced with Alec.
Oh my God, they're winning everything.
It looks nastier than it was the year before. And I know Alec is such an incredibly smart player, is going to make them play fundamentally better. And 4v4, I mean, World War II, I believe, is the last title we saw. And that game was very, very slow and very methodical. I don't think at least from what we've seen, the new one, Cold War, won't be like that.
It's a bit faster.
Which at least is a bit more beneficial to guys, especially when guys like Cammy and Kleenex that play at that pace. But again, if it is at that pace, will guys like Methods and Bance, who have been knocked for being a lot slower, be able to keep up? I would have liked them to at least get insurance in those young AMs like they did. They did it this year too. They got guys like Kleenex, guys like Cam that hadn't necessarily proved themselves in the pro league yet, but as insurance, and down the line they put them in, and what happens? They end up winning one of the events. So
Totally agree. So maybe my
Yeah.
final point, sorry, we
Look
spent a
at-
long time on this, it's just because I was passionate. My final point is this is a really important year, right? Like this is probably the last year where, like I said, it's Cammy and Kleenex's last year on their contract. It's probably the last year before expansion. Like there's no way where you can go into it 4, potentially 8. I mean, Hastro said he'd like to see 8 in 2022, right? Now that's a large number, but you might see a significant amount of teams enter this league in expansion, and you have your 2 young stars no longer under team's contract. The 100 Thieves comes in there and says, hey, by the way, like Cammy Kleenex, come play for us. Oh, and by the way, your other 2 aren't going to be Methods and Bans. Like, it's not a good look. Like, you have to do this is a really important year for this organization, and I have to have faith that they're going to make the right decision. Because I think if all of us here are sort of in agreement that, like, hey, this can't happen, they have to be thinking the same thing. So we will see.
I'm also going
It's
to
still
say
early.
this is another conversation almost, but I feel like, and it makes sense that people are really clearing out the rosters this year because we're going for 4 people, but I genuinely think that like the amount when teams clear their rosters, like I think it needs to like tone itself down a bit. I feel like people need to start sticking with a core roster year over year, and like maybe like change out the peripheries more often. Because if people keep on just clearing their roster every single year, and by people I mean the franchises, I feel like it just makes for the pro players it's such an unstable kind of like career path that there's going to be more people that retire out, and you're going to have less talent in the talent pool to come up. And I genuinely think this is happening with Overwatch right now. And they've pretty much people just clear their roster every year for 3 years now, and like the contenders scene right now is just it's not that good. There has been some good people come out of it. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think anybody can say that like the contenders talent pool in Overwatch, which is their tier 2, is nearly as good as it was a year or 2 ago. I genuinely think that people need to like stop being so in coming years, not this year, maybe not next year, but in coming years, be so frivolous to just like dropping everybody.
Yeah,
That's the one thing in the COD scene though that's always been kind of crazy is like the idea of stability, because obviously in COD there's a new game title every year.
Yeah.
And that just kind of it does in a way force team changes, because certain players are known to be better at certain developer games, and then also you have the whole thing of like champs feels like the end of like both the title and the year.
Yeah.
And not making a change after you don't win champs almost seems like the wrong thing to do. Like I know what you're saying, like it'd be better if teams could stick together more and kind of create a better chemistry with the team and have it going like longer. But the problem is if you don't win champs, if you don't get like top 3 champs, you kind of see the whole year as like a loss.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I
think
the
if
thing
Chris
is
is saying
that
keep it
hold up,
core.
the thing is that with that, if you're a pro and you go 1 year on in pro league, 1 year off in champs, 1 year on in pro league, something like that. If good year, you bad year, you get dropped. Like I don't think you're gonna stay in that route for that long. You're not gonna stay in that career path, and you're just gonna like retire out and do something else.
That's fair.
the difference that we've seen, especially in the Call of Duty League, I'm not familiar if this is a thing in Overwatch, but we've seen, especially with this free agency, how it's been rumored in the past the CDL is called the CDL Friendship League, where essentially you just get together with your friends and players and create a roster around that. And we're seeing with a lot of the rumored rosters that a lot of the players that have played in the past, they're sticking together. Like we're seeing with FaZe, Alec is back with the Tiny Terrors. We saw with New York, especially last year. I mean, all those guys.
Oh my
Attached
god.
Lamar.
Attached needs a better team.
Attached
Oh
needs to
god.
get away from Lamar. Lamar's a good player, but Attached is way better. Those two have been stuck together. I mean, we see even now Clay and Zuma once again. It's like everyone's teaming with
Octane and Looney, man. Octane just picked up Looney.
Yeah, Octane's rumored to pick
I
up
can't
Looney,
believe
which
that.
that is absurd. Like Looney's, I didn't think
Come on,
Looney would be
man.
on the team, and it's stuff like this where with the friendship league, we're seeing a lot of talented players get left out, and a lot of players that we've seen in the past get left out because they aren't in that friendship loop, so to speak, and especially with them not being expansion, and we're moving. If anything, it's we're laying off 12 players, even more. I think we counted was like 16 players are losing their spot this year. It's something has got to give. I really wish the CDL, or not necessarily the CDL, but I guess it would be the CDL if they would have at least given the opportunity, or I hope they give the opportunity for a stronger presence or more focus on the amateur scene or the CDC. That way, at least the pro players that can have an opportunity in the AM scene. But it did seem that it left a lot of players, not only the transition to 4v4, but with them all being like, with some being friends, some not. It really left players sort of out of that loop.
I think you'll see it more because I think in the past, right, players had a lot of control, and with franchise, they have a lot less, right? Like there's a GM now. GM can do whatever the GM wants, right? Like, hey, too bad. Like you saw, this is the year, right, where Awakening comes in, looks like an MVP candidate. Matt comes in, looks like an MVP candidate. Draws a hollow. I think it's absolutely Kleenex comes in, looks like he can turn a team around, right? Like I think that whole thing really is changing, and you're going to start to see it. That's in my opinion. I don't know how you don't look at this season and look at how all the young players performed. And if you're a team and you're not going in there and picking up one of these young talent, like I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how you don't look at how Awakening and Mac turned around Florida and New York and how Kleenex turned on Toronto. And if you're not picking up one of these young stars in Standy or Detain or whoever, or Fire, Hydra, Pred, whatever, like I don't know what you're doing, right? Like at the very least, have them on a sub spot, put them in challenges because you can do that now.
I think the last thing to say on that is I think the biggest example of the opposite would be Seattle and what they did this year. We saw Seattle, and I love Seattle. I love, I mean, Karma's I think my favorite player of all time. They went with a veteran roster with guys like Karma, Apathy, Enable, Slack, and Octane, and that roster bombed. They were absolute trash. They were arguably the worst team in the CDL this year.
They're the worst search team.
They were the worst search team. They couldn't win. Their coach, Nubsy, who had helped Genji be so successful the year before, couldn't figure out anything with this team. Not to mention, they had been trying to go after AMS, and they couldn't even do that. Apparently, they weren't able to get guys like Mac and Awakening. So if teams take that approach again, we're taking your more veteran presence, like they're just gonna fail. They're not gonna succeed. We've seen it been tried before, and we've seen it fail once again. We've seen so many AMs be so successful, and there's so much talent still out there that I just can't see you being able to tell your fans, yeah, hey, we're gonna stick pat with the vets instead of trying to take a risk.
No, I totally agree.
But with that, let's get into our last question. And we wanted to compare the two, but what did you guys or what have you guys seen as the differences between the fan base between Overwatch compared to the CDL?
The fan bases or just the leagues as a whole? I think the fan bases are like very different. Like, I mean, I just have to look at I always compare the fan bases. I sort of say, look at the big personalities to come out of Call of Duty and look at the big personalities to come out of Overwatch, right? At the biggest streamers from Overwatch, right? You got your XQCs, you got your DeFran. It's like a very memey community, right? Like memes in Overwatch are like king, right? You have a lot of big content creators who got big off of just meming. Call of Duty, it's like Nade Shot, it's Scump, right? It's a very like frat boy, sorority girl sort of culture to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I love both sides, right? Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to Overwatch in the first place. And it's one of the reasons why I've been so impressed with the CDL. Like, coming from Overwatch, I honestly did not think the CDL would be this successful. I didn't think I'd be this intrigued by it. Personalities are much more jarring in CDL, which I think is great. Like, the fact that Crim 6 and go on there on a podcast and be like, oh, I 1v5 Florida by leaking 4v4. Like, that's hilarious, man. For him to go out there and call God or X out by name, in my opinion, is hilarious. It's like every week there's a new video about drama alert every single week. And I absolutely love it. So Overwatch, you don't get nearly any of that. You get random shit talking here and there, but it's kind of awkward because it's very clearly people who aren't used to it.
There's not as much community engagement too. Like I'm kind of flexing saying this, but when I posted like something on CDL, Comp Overwatch Reddit, like I had C6 and Clayster comment on it, like talking to us.
Yeah, they're active in the Reddit. It's nice.
Yeah, they are, and it's like I've literally never even have I ever seen a pro player in the call. I mean the Overwatch one. It's I feel like it is a lot harder to connect with them like on a more personal level.
With the pro players, you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that's been really unique to Call of Duty because I've been a fan since like 2014, and one thing instantly is how big of personalities everyone is because it's content for all of them, especially early on. It was all of them would stream everything, stream tens, talk trash. It was very toxic at times.
Yeah.
So you saw all the drama. It was never kept behind the scenes. I mean, they've done a better job at limiting it, or at least keeping it more professional. But at the same time, their personalities are so big, and I compare it to like even like Counter Strike, to know a bit different. They got most of their players are more professional, whereas in competitive Call of Duty, you can like they're all like jokesters to say the least. So it's one of the things that I've been happy Call of Duty has had, and I think they need to be able to continue to capitalize on if they want to continue to grow. Because eventually these guys, especially like Scump or Krim, and when they do eventually retire, who's going to keep up that mantle?
Yeah. In my opinion, it's the NBA of esports. It's Call of Duty, man. Like everybody has such a big social media presence. An individual player
Yep.
can have such a large impact on a game. The off season's absolutely insane. These teams are being, dream teams. You got KD going to the Warriors. You got, RCD is going to FaZe. Like I think it's the NBA of esports, man. It's awesome to see. It's honestly really impressed me. I did not think I was going to enjoy the CDL nearly as much as I did this year, but
That's great to
I
hear.
cannot wait for
Yeah.
next year, Cold War, and
I'm
man,
so
it helps. Warzone's popping off, new game every year. Like I think this thing's got a real big future, and Overwatch is struggling, and I think they can turn it around. Overwatch 2 needs to be good, and if it is, I think that can have a larger impact than some people are giving it credit. But we'll see.
Yes, I think with that we're gonna wrap it up here. But it's great to hear that Overwatch fans can come over to the CDL and enjoy it, and that the scene's still growing.
Yeah,
You're 100% right. There's so much room to grow the scene, and it's really only going to go up from here because at the end of the day, Call of Duty's probably one of the most played games worldwide every year. And with developers that seem to be more tuned into the community, I think we're in for a very good year.
yeah.
And I think this Toronto roster could definitely do some things, especially to pick up a guy like Afro. But we'll see.
Come on, man. Give me
Um,
Pred, baby. Come on. Give me a Pred Kleenex lineup
but
going into 2021. Let's see what they can do.
yeah, so thanks for for coming on. It was a lot of fun.
You
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, no
Thanks so much for having
problem.
us, man. Enjoy.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.